pretty normal guy. I've got a wife, I've got 2 kids. I'm a doctor, originally from Kentucky. Did residency in Chicago. Moved, wanted to live out west because of, I was a huge ski bum. And made my way up to Denver because of my dad was living there teaching at the university, and I was able to get in 60, 70, 80 days a year skiing. I was working in the emergency department, just like Greer. I'm an ER trained guy working at a trauma center right downtown. That led me down this path to meeting Greer and doing this alternative kind of stuff. I've always had an interest. When I was a kid growing up on a farm, we were always out looking around for UFOs. We believed strongly they existed, never saw anything to speak of, but my sister and I were very interested. But here there was this sort of ER doc, and it sounded like of course anybody can watch him for 5 minutes and realize he's a bit egocentric, and he's a bit, he's a bit of a character, but then who isn't, right? I mean, we're all kind of quirky folks in this world.
Yeah, I try not to judge the people, just try to look at the information, right?
Exactly. So I got more and more interested in his stuff, and we were down here in Mexico in about January of 11, and we started. My wife and I got interested in this resonance viewing. There was a guy named Simeon Hine, Simeon, last name Hein, and he essentially teaches how to resonance view, and he has some lectures on the internet, and then you can actually pay. He's got a site where he does resonance viewing exercises. He's got his PhD in, I believe, economics or some sort of data analysis, maybe. He lives in Boulder, which is right up the road from us. We actually went and met him. He's an interesting kook, too. Or not kook is too strong. He's an interesting dude. But my wife and I were really struck with our experience of resonance viewing. Well, essentially, we would put the kids to bed while we were in Mexico, and we would follow this protocol that Simeon had put together. So she kept it up, but essentially, we finally let that go, ultimately. But there were other pictures that I could describe, but my description doesn't do them much justice. And really, the point that I was making is through doing this work through the Simeon Hine and resonance viewing, what I really started to create a curiosity around was, is there something else out there? Because resonance viewing is based upon, quantum field theory, where there's everything has interrelatedness in some sort of quantum way, so that you can potentially access everything that ever was or everything that ever will be. Mm-hmm. So when we came back from the Mexico trip, I was ready to do one of these CE-5 initiatives. And one of the main reasons that I was interested in it is because I went up and met Simeon. My wife and I did. My wife's pretty hot, so he was actually more interested in talking to her than me. Yeah. Kind of funny. But at the end of our meeting, because they mainly wanted to talk about resonance viewing because she was doing it so well, and I really wasn't. And there's some reasons behind that. That one of the things that gets in the way of resonance viewing, if you think about the mind for a minute, we can oversimplify it, but you've got your left side, which is the processes, the ordering, compartmentalization, and then you've got right-sided brain, which is sort of creativity, free-flowing, energetic, etc. And in order to resonance view, one of the things that you have to do is you have to throw away everything that your mind is trying to compartmentalize and organize, because then you just know it's your mind processing it, and it's not something entering your mind, your consciousness stream, if you will.
Uh-huh.
And my wife's quite a creative woman, very artistic, and I'm, pragmatic. I'm more organized, structural, a little bit more left brain. And that's what we attributed to my lack of success in that. So anyway, as we were meeting Simeon in Boulder, one of the last things I asked him is, do you have any experience with this guy, Dr. Greer? And he's like, oh yeah, I went and did one of the CE-5s up in Wyoming. And I said, what can you tell me about it? And he said, well, what I can tell you about it is that we're all out in the middle of a field, and it's probably about the 4th or 5th day that we're out there. And out in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, not within hundreds of miles of any city or town, in the middle of a field. And he said it was, I believe he said it was raining. And all of a sudden the rain dissipated, and something flew right over above us. And it was blue. And it was probably 50 to 100 feet off the deck, and it completely illuminated our entire circle in blue. And it stayed there for a couple of minutes, and then it shot up into the sky into nowhere. And he said that's all I needed to see. And the reason I was struck by that report was, number one, I felt a reputable guy. I mean, I think he's a bit of a stoner. Whatever, man. I mean, who in Colorado isn't? Probably except me. I think I'm the only non-stoner in the entire state.
Uh-huh.
But a guy that is somewhat analytical in his thought process, because he completed a PhD program. And a guy that's done it has never even mentioned Stephen Greer's name. And then I bring it up, and he's like, oh yeah, I had this crazy-ass experience that I don't tell anybody. And I think I know why it's not the first thing out of his mouth, because you sound like a total freak.
Yeah.
The experiences that I'm going to tell you about in my CE-5 experience, I've told no one but my family. Why? Because it sounds crazy. You can't be a board-certified medical doctor that owns businesses and has a lot to lose, that's just out there sharing some transcendental experience and expecting people to take you seriously.
Yeah. Well,
so,
I think
anyway,
people are open to it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. This event is in Crestone, Colorado, and it's sort of what we would consider in the real world April or spring, maybe May. But it was pretty cold up there. And when it wasn't cold, the mosquitoes were biting pretty bad. But to give you sort of an idea of Crestone, because I know you haven't been, the nearest big city is Denver, which is 4.5 to 5 hour drive, highway speeds. The closest small town is probably population 50,000, and that's another 2 hour drive. The closest interstate is at least 3 to 4 hours. The closest highway, if you want to call it a highway that probably only has a couple of hundred cars down a day, is 30 to 50 miles, and you access this place down a county road that dead ends. So I'm guessing you maybe get 50 cars a day.
Mm-hmm.
So this place where we are is a sand flat that's 5 miles off of that county road after dark, with no city or town nearby. Crestone is probably 15 miles away.
Uh-huh.
And that's a joke of a town. Super small. I'm guessing. So anyway, ability of any of this. So there's about 20 people in the group, and everyone is in a circle with the center open, where Greer can go in there and give a talk if he wants to, or lead something. And because you're in 360 degrees, with the diameter of the circle is probably 20 or 30 feet, you have every vantage point covered throughout the night sky. The other thing that he does is he has everyone show up with different types of electronic devices. So people show up with radar detectors, people show up with cameras and video with tripods, and there's no flashes are allowed, no external light sources are allowed. The only light you see are from the LEDs of people's cameras. And then people bring these really sophisticated night vision cameras, and they share it with you so you can see really interesting detail at night. And so the first bit of weirdness that if I were in your shoes sounds trivial is that all these, as you're showing up, people are setting up their equipment and all these radar detectors are on. And they're not doing anything because there's no cars around. And then what's really creepy is that Dr. Greer plays this harmonic thing that's part of the CE-5 protocol. Mm-hmm. And you do a brief meditation to sort of get everybody centered and everybody calmed down and sort of out of their heads a little bit. He leads a meditation, and these radar detectors start going absolutely crazy. And I say to myself, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me because I don't know how a radar detector works. They pick up some sort of energy that the police are putting out. I'm supposing radar for echolocation and speed conceptualization, but I don't really know the inner workings of these machines. But what's really bizarre is all these fucking machines start going crazy. They start making loud beeps, and then they start to cycle and they start working together. And these radar detectors are going, and they're like making the same waveform sounds together. And it's truly bizarre. Don't know what to make of that. You can think of whatever you will. Yeah. So the long and short of it is, he has somebody there that is in charge of, they've got satellite charts. So they can tell, is that an Iridium satellite? Is that Russian space junk? Is that, some sort of space station? They've got all these charts out so that someone that's there can say, if somebody sees something overhead and they say, apex at 3 o'clock moving westbound, then somebody can say, oh, that's Russian space junk. Mm-hmm. So, so if I can just sort of bring in a total of 5 days, weird stuff happened. Weird flashes of light within the circle. We saw lots of, I say lots, probably saw 5 or 6 orbs of light, meaning 500 feet away, a circular blast of energetic light that all of us witnessed that would be there and spontaneously go away. And I even was one of the people at one time that put on the night vision glasses and walked over to the area where we saw it, and there was nothing there but a bank of dirt. I think one of the more spectacular things that happened when we were in that circle there on the sand flat was that I say more than one person, it may have been 5, it may have been 30, I don't know how many, we noticed something overhead that looked like it was a satellite. And we all located it. Somebody would call out some coordinates, and we were looking up at it. And then one of the protocols that you do is if it's something you're looking at that's man-made, you ask it in your mind as a group or an individual, I need you to move north, move south. And of course, if it's a man-made object, it can't do that. Likewise, these things are traveling at thousands of miles an hour, so it doesn't really meet within the envelope of specs for a satellite object to be able to make that type of turn at that kind of velocity. So I recall specifically one night when we saw an object and we as a group asked it to make a sharp, north turn at a 90-degree angle, and the fucking thing did it. And that, and you could imagine the energy level of how everybody would gasp when you're sitting in a group asking something going, 10,000 miles an hour to take a right-hand turn and not change your velocity at all, and it just did it like that. And we followed that object until it was no longer visible. Here's what you need to understand, is that when you do this kind of thing, this is on the experiential level. And so, imagine if a teenager, this is the best analogy I can think of. Imagine if a teenager came up to you and they said, can you explain to me what having an orgasm during sex feels like? That's that's a transcendental moment for humans, where it's trying to explain the unexplainable. And so the issue with this CE-5 thing is some of the most moving things that happened to me on this experience were experiences that no one else was there to experience. The two experiences that I had on this CE-5 initiative that made me unquestionable that there is something else out there that we don't know and that we don't understand, there was no one else there to experience it. There were other people there, and they didn't have the same experience as me. And so, when you go on a show like Joe's, I would be like, I don't want to be duped. Show me the evidence. But I think what is most interesting about and most compelling about what I'm telling you is you guys can do shows where you try to pick this apart, but it's an experience. It's a transcendental moment that's very difficult to quantify, explain, qualify. And I think where Dr. Greer, where he is, for better or worse, messing up, is trying desperately, in his own way, to explain in a scientific way, this stuff is real. Because it's so much. What I can tell you, Jesse, is if you had the opportunity to go to a CE-5, you will get whatever you need to understand whatever you need to understand.
And what would the Sci-Fi Network cameras pick up? I mean, anything?
They would pick up stuff. They would hopefully, if they were positioned correctly, but as many nights as you have, they're going to get something. But here's the thing. Look, Brazil aside, look where we live. We live in an America that what people are expecting is the close encounter disc to land and for the little monkeys to come out, or they're expecting that black rapper to fly overhead in an F-18 and be shooting down the freaking whatevers, right?
Mm-hmm.
We live in this world that if Joe picked up a couple of orbs of light on camera, is that going to be enough to convince anyone? I mean, Dr. Greer, if you go on his website, he's got pictures of orbs ad nauseum. He's got crafts of light shooting overhead. And people can experience, they can explain that away because they weren't there. And it gets people in their safety zone. But what I'm telling you is if you were there and you experienced it, you saw it firsthand, you experienced the energy level that's in the group, and you experienced that thing inside of you we all want to see some definitive evidence because humans are pioneers. You know, what we do as a species is go where no man has gone before. We have this insatiable appetite to quench that, and until I don't think that anybody is ever going to get what people want is to have the ship come down above Capitol Records in LA and have it be on all the TV screens and have the president say they're here before they'll believe it. I don't think that anything like that's going to happen. I don't think anything that Joe could pick up could satisfy the masses. But what I would submit is that if you went and did one of these, you would either see enough or not enough to satisfy whatever urge that you've got.
But yeah, I'm kind of with Joe Rogan on the I want to believe spectrum.
Yeah, and I did too, and that's why I went. And the interesting thing is I went extremely skeptical, and I really had to check that because there's a certain quorum of intent. So if you ever study any mind training, any Buddhist mind training, what you'll find out is that intention is really the keystone of what we get out of life. For example, if you intend to be happy, strangely enough, everything shows up kind of fun. And if you have the intention of being in a pissy-ass mood, it's kind of weird how everybody shows up an asshole or a bitch. Life is weird that way. So when I went to the CE-5, I was a skeptic, but I knew I had to check some of that skepticism at the door and be open-minded and not be attached to preconceived notions. Like what I was telling myself before I went was, you know what? The only way I'm really going to believe is if I see the darn mothership come down and land right in the middle of us, then I'll believe. And strangely enough, the incident that made me a complete and total believer, in conjunction with everything else that we had seen in a group, was something that I experienced completely alone. You want me to tell you about that experience?
Yeah.
So, one of the last days of the group meeting, we went up to Blanca Peak, which is a national park, and this Blanca Peak is a mountain that the Native Americans have always said is that inside of the mountain is essentially a landing strip for the gods of light from above, or they're essentially saying this mountain is a landing strip for aliens. In one of Greer's books, he actually has an account with at least 4 witnesses where they witnessed a craft landing and there was a bunch of light and they walked up and had some sort of interaction with this ship. So what we did was we went up there. We got a permit from the park, which had closed. So we're up on the top of this mountain, an empty parking lot, where there's just us, and for thousands of acres in every direction is national park. There's nothing mechanized, electronic anywhere close. And so we did this a meditation or whatever, and then our intent was we were going to go up to this previous landing site and all move towards this landing site together in the hopes of some type of interactive experience. And we all had a buddy. We're on the buddy system so that nobody would ever get lost because we're in the middle of nowhere. So I had this buddy. His name was Larry. And we drove out there together and drove back together. So anyway, it's about 1 in the morning, and we finally meditated. We've quietly gone up to this landing site, and I said I'm going to be right next to Greer because, you know, if he's had all these experiences, damn, I want to be right next to him if one of them happens. Mm-hmm. And Larry was actually a couple of feet behind me. So as a group, we all start to walk very slowly up towards this landing site, and we probably walked for 20 or 30 feet. And what happened to me was, as we were walking forward, so we're in the middle of nowhere, we're walking up, about 20 of us in a group. We've got our hands to our sides so we don't look like, 20 cavemen walking towards, some interstellar civilization that gets freaked out. And off in the distance, I didn't look over there, but over and to the right, it sounds about 10 or 15 feet away. I hear the strangest sound, like very close to what a radar gun would sound like when you were a little kid, like a wow, 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 wow.
Okay.
And I look over there and I see nothing, and I see no lights, and I don't see anybody else reacting to it. So we keep walking forward, and once again over there I hear this, whoa, 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 and it's sounding louder, and it's sounding more intrusive, and I'm actually quite puzzled by it. But we keep walking forward, and at the end, we stop, everybody stays silent, and we walk back to the parking lot, which is about a quarter of a mile walk away. And what was truly in the realm of bizarre for me, and also what really sold me on this entire experience, was that sound was very clear to me. It was clearly not man-made. I can go through the differential diagnosis for you of what's the differential of somebody hearing weird sounds in their ear? But I can tell you I don't fit that model for any of them. I'm not having temporal lobe seizures. I'm not having tinnitus. I'm not having an organic cause for me to hear that weird sound.
Yeah, there had to be a lot of wildlife.
What's that?
You had to have, you're out in the...
Yeah, we're out in wildlife, man, and this shit was radar gun, sci-fi sounds.
Okay.
Now here's the thing this was, nobody else heard it. Okay? Now that's, to me, is bizarre. Because this shit was loud. And it was way over there. And it was not created here. And it was not an organic sound. And no one else heard it. Now here's what is really shocking to me. Is my buddy Larry, who I told you was about 5 or 10 feet behind, mm-hmm. He saw something. He saw laser lights in a grid on the ground, about 3 feet off the ground, that were in grids that made squares, all the way across this vast opening in which we were. I saw nothing of that nature. So Larry and I, we drove home, and everybody else shared their bizarre fucking experience in this place. not everyone, a select few had experiences of which no one else experienced it.
Hmm.
And so I'm driving home with Larry. It's about a 2 hour drive, no, an hour drive back to Crestone. And I was truly taken by this experience because I had an experience that told me definitively and without question that something otherworldly was going on, that no one else in the group had the experience of, and others had a similar experience that no one else experienced. Tell me why that happened on a mass scale. Why did 5 or 10 people have a unique experience that no one else experienced? It's almost the same as everyone having the same experience and sharing it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you look at it from a scientific process, if everyone is in the same space, and let's say 90% of the people there at least are sane, there are a couple of Fruit Loops there, man. I mean, you're going to attract the Fruit Loops. They're like, oh, your aura and your energy, and I see you ghost. You know, they say stupid, crazy shit, man. You're going to attract those.
Yeah.
But if you've got a group of, let's say, 5 out of 30 people that are sane, with no organic psychopathology, that are all in the same place at the same time and all have different experiences, what does that mean?
It beats me, honestly, no idea.
That's why it was an amazing experience.
Yeah. No, that's pretty cool.
And there were a couple of other experiences. I did not get the mothership, but I can tell you that 99% of the people there that went there had amazing, bizarre, let's call it potentially multidimensional, let's call it transcendental experiences that left them without question that something else is going on in this universe.
So have you experienced anything like this since on your own?
No. And he seems to have such a thirst for acceptance and for wanting people desperately to believe or understand this that he may take it a little bit too far. I find it difficult. If I had any negatives to say about Stephen, it's that I just explained to you, how do you explain to someone who's never had sex or orgasm what it feels like?
Yeah.
To me, I think that that's a little bit too much to bite off and chew. And what Stephen is doing is he's saying, this is what it is, and this is why, and God damn it, I'm right. And to me, I don't see how you can do that, because how can you explain the unexplainable? How can you say that this is multidimensional space travel, and I've got all the answers to all of your questions?
Well, see,
because I've experienced.
Yeah, he was telling Joe Rogan that basically it's happening in the next couple of years.
I know.
It's going to be revealed.
I know.
And so it's it's that type of language that I heard back in 2008 when I worked with that kid that really got me into a lot of this stuff. He was saying the same things to me, and he had all these theories about Obama's going to announce this and that, and he's not crazy. He's a smart kid, but like, you know, you get so wrapped up into this stuff.
That's my point exactly. I think everyone should take a moment of pause. I'll tell you, Stephen is on to something, because we had some wacky experiences. I mean, they were truly amazing. And like I told you, he's got something going on. I think that the CE-5 trip is an excellent starting point for anybody to base some sort of experiential level experience with whatever this stuff is. We could call it multidimensional beings. We could call it something else. Where the shortcomings of the CE-5 trip are is all the days where you sit through lectures and you hear about cabals and black budgets and people repeatedly trying to kill him but unsuccessful.
But I mean, all that's just.
I think Joe said it best. There's no doubt that he believes what he's saying 100%. Whether or not it's the truth, who knows? But I tell you what, there's something that I learned. One of the reasons that I have been as successful in business as I have is I realized the point in time where I was getting in the way of the business. Meaning I was trying so hard to keep control of the business, to be a doctor, to manage people, to do the books, to the accounting, the legal aspect. And I attribute 99% of my success to, number one, putting an amazing team around me. And number two, getting out of the way for this thing to be whatever it's going to be. And so Stephen has this amazing thing going. You should see him when he's out doing the CE-5 thing at night. He's truly inspirational. And he has got this thing nailed where he can bring groups of people together. And he's got this protocol together and amazing stuff shows up. But my only commentary on him is get out of the way. Because when he tries to bring himself into the center with, I've got threats on my life and I've briefed all these presidents and blah, blah, blah. And it gets to sounding very egocentric and almost discredits the amazing stuff that happens there at night. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense to you?
That makes total sense, yeah. I mean, that's
it's like, I wanted to say, get out of the way, man. Let's stop talking about you, and let's start talking about possibilities. Let's talk about experiences. Let me just tell you about one other thing that happened that will give you a greater understanding of what I'm saying about get out of the way. Uh-huh. We're sitting around in a circle, and we have our eyes closed, and we're meditating. And he has those night vision goggles on. He's got this insane pair that has amazing detail. And he's leading us through a meditation. All of a sudden, he's like, oh, shit. I just saw this amazing spacecraft over that mountain over there. And we all turned around, and whatever he saw was gone. So then the next day, we're in one of his lectures or group meetings, and we're talking. And he's talking about an example, and he's like, and remember last night when we saw that spacecraft over by that mountain? And he goes on, and so he has submitted as evidence into the group that thing happened when he was the only experiencer.
Yeah.
So that was before I had my ray gun, my experience. But even still, it was only my experience. I can't submit that as evidence to you today, Jesse. I can't.
Yeah.
It's not fair. It's not scientific. And I'm fearful that he's got a group of people around him that visualize him as such a demigod that if he says the experience happened, they just take it on face value that it did.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah. That's a perfect example, actually. It totally makes sense to me. I know people like that. I mean, everybody knows people like that right there. It's kind of like a tendency of a used car salesman mentality, a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I totally see that.
And I don't want to discredit his experience because he's an amazing guy and he may see some crazy shit just like I heard that crazy radar gun.
Uh-huh.
But it's unfair to the entire UFO movement, to the group. It's a discredit to his organization that thing can get submitted as evidence, and all of a sudden it's in the record book. So remember when we saw that big spaceship over by the mountain? Nobody else saw it. I remember that instance clearly. Is that I had transcendental moving experiences on CE-5. Dr. Greer is doing something, and it's crazy because he is getting something is happening on every freaking trip. I had incredible moving experiences, but the most moving ones were the ones that I can only tell you. You can only take my word for it because I've got no scientific evidence for it. So if you, Jesse, want that kind of experience, you're never going to get it by just seeing a couple of bleeping lights on a video camera, because you can always explain that away. You're a videographer, you're a computer guy, you can be like, that was a ditzel, that was a pixel, that was a software encryption problem. But if you go to one of these things, you will have an amazing experience. But I'm skeptical that anybody's going to believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time.
Oh, yeah. It was fun to talk about it.
Yeah, and you haven't talked to anybody about this, you said?
Well, I talked to my wife. My business partner was interested, so I told him about it. Told my mom. 3 people now. Yeah. I just didn't want it sliced up to where it sounds like I'm making Greer out to be a total, idiot or a chode or something. I mean, I think you got the point. He's an amazing guy, but he's the only thing limiting himself.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I have no angle. I have no.
Yeah.
I have no fight in this battle. I just.
There you go. I want you to go experience it because it'll blow your mind.
What did you pay to go out there?
I think it's like $700 or $800. And luckily for me, I mean, the hotel that you stay in is freaking $30 a night or something, or you could even camp out if you wanted. And I could drive over because it was. There's one down in Florida. They do one down at Naples, I think. Pretty close to you.
I'm surprised that Florida has. Well, I guess there's a lot of sightings down there, but.
Yeah, they had some really good stuff going down there. But yeah, I think it was about $700 or $800 or something.
Yeah.
But they may give you some sort of reporter discount or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And
check it out.
Yeah, I hope the Joe Rogan show actually happens. I hope.
Yeah.
He's mentioned it a couple of times. He mentioned it in the Columbus Dispatch article, and he's brought it up a couple of times. I mean, I don't see how the show wouldn't be a hit. It would definitely be a hit,
Well, maybe he'll see this and be like, God darn, I got to do this thing. All right, sounds great, man. Good to talk to you, Jesse.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Moore. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, have a good one, buddy. See you, bud.